This video actually started out as a review of Thrawn Chaos Rising by Timothy Zahn, but I found myself talking more about why I liked the character than the book, so I ended up just rewriting the script to talk about what Thrawn brings to the franchise rather than that specific book. I may at some point release the book review as well, but I never finished it and the book has been out for a while, so if you haven't read it, it's pretty good, as is pretty much everything that Timothy Zahn writes. For anyone unfamiliar with Thrawn, he popped up in Legends in the 90s and was featured quite heavily for a while, mainly in books. Timothy Zahn, who created the character, is at least partially credited with keeping interest in the franchise alive during a period of time between the original trilogy and the prequels, specifically at a time when interest in the franchise was at an all-time low. As a writer of slightly more military science fiction, Timothy Zahn brought an entirely new dynamic to the franchise. In Legends books, Thrawn takes over the Empire after Episode 6, and he's written from the ground up to be an opposite villain to what we see in the movies. He rules by loyalty, not fear, he respects the lives of his underlings, and most importantly, he lacks any sort of force powers or abnormally powerful physical traits. His only abnormal traits are his intelligence and his perception. In a franchise where every villain is armed with a laser sword and a temper, Thrawn provides a little bit of diversity. Those stories were quite successful in Legends right up to the point where Thrawn was decanonized along with the rest of the EU when Disney took over. Thankfully, in one of the best moves Disney has made with the franchise, they did decide to rewrite Thrawn back into canon in 2017, and he's been featured in several more books as well as multiple seasons of the Rebels cartoon. In Thrawn's debut Legends appearance, he was clearly intended to be an antagonist, but his redeemable traits became much stronger in later books, in my opinion, as his position as a fan favorite became more clear. Rewriting him in canon allowed for him to be more tonally consistent, and when the dust settled, Thrawn ended up with a significant role in the new timeline. Thrawn is perhaps the franchise's best example of an anti-villain. As a character, he has purely heroic goals and many redeemable traits, but his attitude towards necessary evil puts him solidly on the side of the villains. The character's archetype isn't too different from the much more well-known anti-hero. While an anti-hero might make morally good choices purely out of self-interest, Thrawn as an anti-villain makes choices that appear morally questionable in the name of the greater good, but not to a degree that overshadows his redeeming qualities, especially when he is directly contrasted to the rest of Imperial High Command. Perhaps because Disney isn't ready to show Thrawn's future, much more time in canon is spent on Thrawn's past and his backstory than was ever spent in Legends. Thrawn comes from a section of the galaxy outside of the Outer Rim that is inaccessible to most due to instability in hyperspace lanes due to a supernova. This allows for an entirely isolated culture and society with a different set of circumstances than what we know in the Republic or the Empire. His backstory also functions as Thrawn's heroic motivation to join the Empire, since he states he's aware of threats to his people much greater and much more evil than even the Emperor, and views the Empire's strength as necessary if the galaxy is to survive at all. Interestingly, Jedi don't exist in Thrawn's part of the galaxy. This allows for two critical weaknesses that make Thrawn defeatable. His unfamiliarity with the Force means that he's incapable of predicting a Force user's actions, and his unfamiliarity with Imperial politics and his position as an outsider means he faces animosity from many people in power who he unintentionally offends.
You could have told the rest of us.
I wanted it to be a surprise.
Part of what makes Thrawn interesting, though, despite his lack of personal power or shiny weapons, is that these are his only two weaknesses. Timothy Zahn, who created the character, has stated the only way to defeat Thrawn is with something he's incapable of predicting. In this respect, Thrawn falls into an interesting class of character, not too different from Hondo, though on a slightly more powerful level. In the world of Star Wars, it can be difficult to prevent the feeling that characters fall into two categories, Force users and everybody else. Since Force users are much more powerful than the average character, it's important to provide characters without Force powers that are capable of standing up to that tier of power without any Force powers of their own, to prevent the rest of the galaxy from feeling irrelevant. Characters like Hondo and Thrawn are capable of providing meaningful challenges and threats to the Force users of the galaxy, purely based on their own competence and ingenuity. Hondo went toe-to-toe with many Force users throughout the Clone Wars and always survived, as he famously said, despite appearing to just be a normal pirate. Thrawn was one of the most powerful Imperials to ever exist, likely only outmatched by Vader and Palpatine, despite having no personal power of his own. They show that not only does power make a character formidable, but also a lack of weaknesses can make a character equally strong. A normal person with an extraordinary degree of competence can keep Force users in check, and this allows characters that aren't Jedi or Sith to remain relevant. Without characters like Thrawn and Hondo, it would be much easier for Star Wars to just turn into a series of slightly power-creeped Force users, where everyone else feels like a plot device for the Jedi or the Sith in question. Though Disney obviously hasn't handled the franchise perfectly, Thrawn is a perfect example of what I love about new canon and what they're doing right. Clearing out some of the questionable quality content of Legends and rewriting old stories to fit the new timeline sometimes allows for the gems of Legends to shine in a way that they never would have gotten to otherwise. All of Thrawn's canon books have been written by the original Legends author, Timothy Zahn, which was no doubt a major piece of why the transition of the character to canon went over well. Having the character's creator involved in the recanonization of a beloved character shows not just respect to the author and the fans, but also to the character itself, and ensures that the character doesn't feel too different from what the fans remember. It also helps that Zahn seems to have endless enthusiasm when it comes to writing for Star Wars, and his love for the characters he writes shines through clearly. Personally, that's always nice to see, and for me, that doesn't go unappreciated. I have very little doubt that Disney has something else planned for Thrawn, since his future is so intentionally ambiguous, and I cannot wait to see what it is. Thrawn feels like a connecting link to the future of Star Wars as Disney searches for a way to expand the franchise onto new frontiers and new stories now that the Skywalker saga is done. An appearance in a live-action show is possible, perhaps even one of the unannounced movies, but at the very least I know he will continue to appear in books until then, and I will continue to read them all. I haven't been disappointed by one yet. Okay, that was supposed to be the end of the video. For anybody that hasn't seen the most recent Mandalorian episode, as well as some additional leaks that have come out within the past week or so, you might want to go watch and then come back to this. The main part of the video is over, but I do have something I want to talk about, because as soon as I finished editing the video, the new Mandalorian episode came out, and it has some really interesting stuff in it. So this is your spoiler warning. Get out while you can. Alright, now that anybody that didn't want to hear about spoilers is gone, oh my word, they finally did it. It's been a long time that I've been talking about this, and the night I decide to finish editing this video, which has been in the works for weeks, I actually went and watched The Mandalorian as soon as I was done. As soon as I was done recording the part about me thinking he would show up on Disney Plus at some point, and he shows up on Disney Plus. That's really fascinating timing. I don't want to redo the whole video, because a lot of people probably haven't seen the episode yet, and also this took me a long time to make. I've never made a video before, and I want to make something else. I don't really want to make this again, because I've already made several versions of this. But I'm unbelievably excited. This isn't scripted, obviously. I think he'll probably appear either in one of the later seasons or in a separate show or even a movie, like I said. I had a feeling it was going to be him. I had seen some sort of leak earlier that day, and I had also seen some signs pointing towards it at the beginning of the episode. But the fact that they actually pulled the trigger and did it is just amazing.